Don't want to foul. Shannon from the corner, and it's over. Gonzaga, the flipper still fits.
Russell takes the snap, drops back. He's going to throw down the middle. He's got a man. The ball is caught.
Game over,
it is
baby.
a touchdown. The game is over. The Seahawks are going back to the Super Bowl in Glendale. What a catch in the end zone. It is curse.
Welcome back to the locker room after that wonderful long weekend for Independence Day. Back in the studio for, it doesn't even matter the episode because we're going to be here for the long haul.
You bet we are.
We are in it to win it. We are here for good, and we're here to give you probably the only consistently running sports radio talk show podcast, wherever you're, video, Facebook, wherever you're listening to us, we are the only consistent one in the Spokane area.
Yeah, you could take that to the bank.
You can, at least until someone else tries to push us out of here, which could happen, but...
Or until the economy just completely collapses, in which banks will be somewhat irrelevant.
The world just falls into darkness. Then we might be in trouble. But for now, we do still have sports. We do still have some big news to go over. First Patrick Mahomes, 10-year, up to a $504 million deal.
Man, I thought it was 503. I swear every time I look at the deal, it just increases.
It does. And what was crazy, I saw this on Instagram. It was, I think both ESPN and SportsCenter brought this up. They broke down how much money he's making per second, per minute, per whatever. So this show's been going on for about, 2 minutes now? So he's made about $200 already.
It's pretty good.
And that second, $1.60.
What have we made so far?
Another second, $1.60. That's how much he's making.
Okay.
So by the end of this show, he's going to be, if this is a 30-minute show, he's going to make about $3,000.
It's insane.
That is insane.
It's ridiculous.
And then at the end of this day, he will have made $137,808. And then it's just mind-numbing numbers. But the big thing I think that we need to discuss is Patrick Mahomes worth that sort of money, and is any player in the NFL worth that sort of money? If you think no.
It's tough. It's really tough. The Chiefs fans, I would be very interested to talk to them and what they think and feel about this contract, because everybody knew it was coming. It was inevitable, especially after his first year as a full-time starter, being the league's MVP, throwing for 50 touchdowns, going into overtime against the Patriots in the AFC Championship game, and then coming back having numbers-wise not as good of a season, but injury played a part in that. But taking the team to the Super Bowl and winning it, and coming back and putting all those Niner fans and Kyle Shanahan supporters to shame and shut them up for at least the offseason. But there's no way out of it. You had to give him this contract. I think the thing that stood out to me the most was the longevity of it, the 10 years. That's insane. I've never seen in the NFL a contract that was that long. I mean, you got to imagine he... being what he is for the sport and for the town of Kansas City, he's going to be able to renegotiate when the market changes. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the cap this year in particular, because of the virus and some of the revenues that might not be coming in through the stadiums like they usually would. But you would think if things get back to normal that the cap's going to continue to go up as it has been consistently for the past 10 years.
Yeah, I think the only other players in NFL history to receive at least 10 years is Brett Favre and Dan Marino. Both got 10-year deals. Recently, obviously, that's not been the case. But looking past that, too, I think the big thing with this contract is I think it's not until 2025 where a huge chunk of this guaranteed money kicks in. And like you said, the renegotiation of this contract is really going to give Mahomes this actually not just Mahomes, but Mahomes and the Chiefs that flexibility down the line, because Mahomes wanted a deal that's going to reset the market, be completely different than a contract that has ever been seen before, and this is the one to do it. With this contract, and I don't think it's going to happen, but with that contract being played out throughout the entirety of his career, he'd be the highest paid player in NFL history by far, passing Eli Manning, who's number 1, which is a mind-numbing stat too, because that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Hey, Peyton's number 2. So if you combined Eli Manning and Peyton Manning's contracts, it would still be less than $500 million over their entire career.
It's insane.
So I think, when I look at Mahomes' contract, you're right. The Chiefs had to do something. Mahomes needed something too, especially coming off of a two decent injuries. You know, that dislocated kneecap could have been a really big deal. So he needed that protection. The Chiefs needed that protection, and I think being able to provide him with a contract that gives him the amount of money that he was looking for, and also provides the Chiefs the ability to renegotiate down the line, and Mahomes the ability to renegotiate, is also important. Now, looking past that, I think these sort of contracts, there's going to be a breaking point. Eventually, the bubble's going to pop, because the NFL revenue, while it has been increasing, you know, it's increased tenfold probably over the last couple of years, even based off of their revenue structure. I just don't. Eventually, these can't keep going up, I would have to guess. I don't know.
I don't know. At this rate, it doesn't seem like they're going to. But yeah, I agree with you. At some point, it would seem logical that the bubble is going to pop. And it's going to be fascinating for two quarterbacks in particular, the way that their upcoming contract negotiations play out. And those two are Dak Prescott and Deshaun Watson. If you were the Cowboys, what people were saying this entire offseason is like, hey, you might want to get Dak on an agreed contract before Mahomes signs this mega extension, which has happened, and they failed to do that, instead just franchising him. So that's going to bite the Cowboys in the butt here whenever they do end up restructuring.
My guess with Dak is he knew this was coming. I think his agent was like, hold off.
Yeah.
What does it matter? They're not going to get rid of you.
Yeah.
The Redskins did the same thing with Kirk Cousins. They're not going to get rid of him until after 3 years of him doing the franchise tag business. And eventually he's like, send me off. I don't want to be here. You know, let me go. And he did. And then he signed a ridiculous contract with the Vikings too. But I think you're right. I think the Cowboys and I think the Texans missed an opportunity, both, you know, within 50 miles of each other. I think they both really have an issue on their hands now, because with this Mahomes contract. Now, again, Mahomes, I think Deshaun Watson is a better quarterback than Dak Prescott, especially in the long term. And so I think it might hurt the Texans a little bit more. Granted, they haven't been in as big of public discussions of contract discussions that the Cowboys have been, and a lot of that just stems back to Jerry Jones and them boys. You know, they have their stuff that really makes America just focus on the Cowboys. You know, they are considered America's team, but you know, that's just their opinion, because the Cowboys haven't really been that special in a long time.
Right.
You know, their biggest highlight from the early 2000s was when Tony Romo botched the snap against the Seahawks in the playoffs. After that,
when they got bounced by Eli and the Giants the year that they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. I think they were 13-3. They got the first round bye, and Tony Romo threw an interception in the end zone to seal the deal and lose that game there at home.
It's really been kind of unfortunate to see the Cowboys in this little rut, and now they have to figure out what to do with Dak and Zeke, because eventually Zeke's a running back, and there's already discussions that, I mean, he was good last year, but he wasn't anything special. So,
and Tony Pollard was promising and showed pretty impressive flashes coming off the bench. The Cowboys, though, if we want to do a little Cowboy segment here, which I know that everyone's dying for.
Everyone loves them.
They do have a really talented roster from top to bottom. Stephen Jones, actually, I feel like flies under the radar in terms of getting credit as a general manager and who he brings in and the draft reputation that they've built over, you know, the past 5, 6, 7 years. And that was the same case this year. So on paper, they're really good. And you got to imagine the addition by subtraction of firing Jason Garrett and moving on can only be that a positive. We'll see if Mike McCarthy brings anything that's less than average, boring, and mundane Mike McCarthy. A lot of people said that he's made changes or improvements and has taken a little bit more of a liking to analytics and everything, and has brought that into his coaching umbrella. So we'll see if that actually ends up being the case or not. But I kind of wanted to ask you about long-term for the Chiefs. Okay, first of all, this contract from a society and a human standpoint, the way the world is right now, is very optimistic. The fact that the Chiefs seem to think that we will exist and be around in 2031. So that was interesting to see.
That's a big plus after the way 2020 has gone. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think the Chiefs might be the ones to bring that truth to fruition out of anyone, having the most successful 2020 so far back in February. But how do you think this sets up this contract and the cap hit that Mahomes is going to have on the Chiefs here for the next 12 years? How do you think it sets them up for their long-term future and their potential for becoming the next dynasty.
The big thing to look at, so a lot of people, when Russell Wilson was signed to his big extension, were like, wow, I can't believe they spent that sort of money on him. And it's like, you have to look at the way that the cap is structured. And the cap has been going up pretty consistently over at least the last 10 seasons. And you get to this point where even though Russell Wilson's making this much more money than the second-tier quarterback, or the guy in second, he's still taking up about the similar amount of percentage of the cap because of the way that the cap is structured. So that's the big thing, is as they might be expecting the cap to go up, it might take a hit this year. In theory, it should rebound after next season. So maybe they just know. Maybe they know that they're going to go through this year. They're going to deal with it. You know, the big cap hits for Mahomes aren't coming for a few years, and I think they did that for a reason. I think Mahomes is like, well, I'm stuck with them, and the Chiefs are like, well, I'm stuck with Mahomes. But we're both protected by the fact that the cap will probably and hopefully be rebounded way before 2025, but just in case, here it is until 2025. So I think the Chiefs are in a decent shape. It's a franchise quarterback. You know, even though Brady has taken pay cuts over the tail end of his career, that just happens when you get to that point, because Brady's probably not worth top 5 QB money in terms of pure talent, but Mahomes obviously is. Yeah. And I think that kind of folds into the fact that Mahomes is probably the best quarterback in the NFL right now. I was one of those people who before last season said he's done it for a year, like big deal.
Pump the brakes. Let's chill out for a second. And
the same thing with Lamar Jackson. I'm going to say the exact same thing, that we have to wait and see. And so Mahomes is definitely the top quarterback, and that got me on this ESPN article. They've been ranking the top quarterbacks moving into the 2020 season. They interviewed 50 scouts, 50 players, 50, I think, executives.
League executives, yeah.
Just to see where the top quarterbacks are. And so I saw Mahomes first. I'm like, that makes sense. Mahomes is the best. What's odd, though, first off, is that there's someone put him at 4, which doesn't make any sense. I'd like to hear who the 3 in front of him are.
Really?
The bigger issue, especially for our area and for who I'm wearing right now, they have Russell Wilson second, and some clown put him at 9.
It was Kellerman.
It has to be Max Kellerman. Yeah, it has to be Max Kellerman. It's probably, it has to be somebody who Russell Wilson's embarrassed, because there's plenty of them for sure. So they had Russell Wilson number 2, which is where he should be. Rodgers at 3. Deshaun Watson at 4. Breeze at 5, which is interesting. Lamar Jackson at 6, which is also somewhat interesting. He's probably in that area. Brady at 7. Wentz at 8. Dak at 9. Stafford at 10. I think the list is decent in terms of actually where they ended up. I think ESPN probably saw that 9 and said, no, we're going to put Russell Wilson at 2. And so they have him at 2. In your opinion, is there anybody on this list outside of the individual rankings, outside just looking at the overall rankings, is there anybody that you think should not be there?
I have a hard time the way that the final results and the final numbers that you just read ended up shaking out. I don't have a huge problem. I do still think it's interesting that Matt Stafford is considered in the conversation. I think he gets lost a lot, and he's been on some pretty mediocre Lions teams for his entire career, but he can sling it. And I mean, he's a very weathered quarterback. Obviously, he had his early career injury problems, but has been pretty consistent since. So it's interesting seeing him up there in the top 10. I'm curious about Breeze, though, because the last 2 seasons in the playoffs, it looked like after an entire year of being 39-40 and playing in the NFL and then finally getting to the postseason, his arm was just giving out. He was throwing ducks, and he didn't look like the same guy.
I completely agree. I think Breeze and Brady probably deserve to be in the top 10.
Just by reputation alone.
I would almost put them 9 and 10.
Yeah.
Like I'd put in this. So just to keep this in mind, this is for 2020. This is moving into the season, and I would put these young guys ahead of, because when I think of top quarterbacks, my thought isn't purely based off of stats, isn't based off of the eye test. I want guys who are going to win, and I want guys who are going to be there and be healthy. That's why I probably wouldn't have Wentz. I'd probably put Wentz at 8, which is exactly where he is.
If we were having a top 10 for talent, Wentz would be a lot higher up the chart. Exactly. I think most people would agree with that. However, he just has not been able to stay on the field, and that's been the case dating back to his time at North Dakota State.
Yeah.
So
I would shuffle it around, bring Dak up. I'd probably bring Lamar at 7. I'd probably put him right above Wentz. I'd probably move Dak up to 6, in all honesty, because he's proven that he can do it with his legs as well.
Yeah.
And, again, while they haven't won a Super Bowl, they have won a decent amount of games. Heck, they beat the Seahawks in the playoffs. So
sure did.
That's what happens. But I think it's really unfortunate because this is all the NFL we really get to talk about. We had Mahomes, we have this, and so let's talk about a sport that's actually happening, that is actually happening tonight. That is the MLS. The MLS is back, and tonight it is, I think it's the Inter Miami, which is the new expansion team in MLS, as well as one other team. It's not the Sounders, so doesn't matter. They play tonight, so that's awesome. MLS is back.
Most teams.
Yes, exactly. And that's the problem that we're going to get to is one of the top teams historically in MLS, especially the last 10 seasons, a consistently good team is FC Dallas. And they're out. They're out of the tournament, but they didn't lose.
No, that's true.
They didn't lose. They just happened to have somehow 10 people test positive, 9 players and a team personnel member test positive for COVID-19. And to me, first off, just on the surface, how does that even happen?
It's impressive more than anything.
Oh, it's so impressive.
I can't wrap my head around 10.
It shouldn't have happened. So FC Dallas is out. The other problem is Nashville FC, the expansion team from, I think, last season. They have 6 players who have tested positive so far. And so they're on that bubble of the bubble to be staying there in this restart tournament that has regular season implications, but also is a tournament just to get soccer back in the United States.
Florida's just not where you want to be right now.
Florida's an interesting place, and I think the big reason why, they must have just thought that compound at the wide world of sports down there in Orlando, which actually I was there 3 years ago for the Thanksgiving tournament for the Zags when they were down at the Advocare Invitational. That's a sweet complex, to be fair. I mean, they have, when I looked out, we were obviously in the field house where they played the basketball games, but when we looked out, there was fields galore. I mean, it is a massive compound. So I get why they want to go there. Just it's Florida. And so it's like, well, Florida's like one of the top 3 states right now for COVID cases. Yeah. So that bubble has to be pretty secure. And even the commissioner, Don Garber, came out and said, we're watching this really close. We're seeing who's testing positive, and we might have to continue to kick teams out, and it may even get to the point where we have to cancel the tournament. And I think that also is where the NBA stands, because you have to have a secure bubble, and MLS is teetering. NBA's having some question marks. Not even all the teams are there.
Well, that's the thing. The NBA has these question marks, and Adam Silver has come out pretty consistently over the last week and raised the concerns that are legitimate and that the bubble might be popped before the bubble even happens. Most of the teams aren't there. I think there are only a couple, including Orlando, obviously.
And they just got there, what, today?
Yesterday, I think. Yeah.
What?
Must have been a hard trip.
A lot
for
of
them.
traffic.
Yeah, but I don't know. From week to week, my optimism and hope for sports returning wavers. And this week, we're at Wednesday, so we're not even fully through it. And I'm kind of on the more pessimistic side, just because it seems like every day multiple teams from multiple leagues, the numbers, the positive tests, they just continue to come out. And in theory and on paper, as Adam Silver said, this bubble should work. However, there have already been some holes in it, and some of the media members that have already gotten down to Orlando before the team have been reporting about what the experience is like with the testing, with the being isolated in your room, not really getting to leave your room at all during the day except to go get tested. And now there have been a bunch of pictures going around the internet about what the meals actually look like and
MLS
intel.
Is right there too.
And the NBA and Disney and Orlando and that whole compound, like you said, major flack for what their meals are looking like. It kind of looks like an extended Lunchable, but with better fruit, vegetables.
Cold lunches from like middle school.
Yeah, pretty much. A lot of options, however, none of the options are really something of substance. You just got to imagine the lifestyles that the majority of these players live with their salaries.
You mean their millions of dollars don't buy them Uncrustable PB&Js?
I mean, if I had millions of dollars, that would probably be one of the first things I would go for, that and a Capri Sun, but that's just me. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if they're able to, for potentially up to 3 months, live a lifestyle that they're just not accustomed to living, and it is just frankly beneath them and what their wages.
And that's crazy too, because it's like, I mean, the lunches didn't look great, believe me, but it's like if you went to public school, you survived off of that for 12 years.
That's true.
And I mean, I turned out okay. I mean, and you seem to be fine.
Yeah, jury's still out.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure that all out. But it is interesting because it's the whole testing aspect. It's these teams need to come in and get tested, and that's where baseball is a little bit different because baseball doesn't have a bubble. Baseball is trying to do a regional approach. For instance, the Mariners are in the AL West. They're playing their AL West seems like normal, 40 games, and then they're playing the NL West, 20 games, and they're staying on their side of the country. The AL and NL Central are in their central part of the country, and then the AL and NL East are in their part of the country. So the MLB, though, just got done with all of their testing, and of the over 3,700 tests, only 1.8% of the league came back positive. That's 58 players and 8 staff members for a total of 66 positive tests. And that's the first batch. That's probably not they probably wanted to see closer to 1%. But I think for the first round of testing for teams that are just now getting going, I mean, the Mariners had videos up on, or live video up on their YouTube today, and baseball is also cautiously optimistic with how their season's going to go. It's so hard for us to be here, and we're talking about baseball, basketball, soccer, NFL, and saying, "Oh yeah, they'll come back." We're so confident because that's not the case.
No.
Now, don't get me wrong. The sports fan in me is like, if sports doesn't come back, that's really going to suck. It's going to be awful. But then the citizen in me is like, well, we also have to kind of take into account some of this, but. With baseball, it's really nice to see them, you see them in their stadiums, they have their masks on there, doing their social distance thing, and it's like, cool, like that's great and all, but I really want baseball back. I really want to see the Mariners young kids out there playing ball because that's the only way that the Mariners are ever going to get good is if they can actually get their up-and-coming youth crop, which actually looks halfway decent finally.
Well, I mean, the other thing for baseball that the game of baseball lends itself well to protecting and being cautious about the virus just because there's so much space. It's not really a contact unless, people are running into each other or, getting picked off or, collisions at home plate and stuff like that. So really, they should have the least amount of hurdles out of all of these sports, except for maybe UFC and boxing, to get over in order to carry out their season, even though they tried their darnest to not even play the season in the first place. But now that we're here, you have to think that the odds for baseball being able to stick it out for the entirety of the season would be the greatest.
And I think some of that, you're looking at some of the players that have opted out, and some of them are pretty big.
Big names.
A lot of former Mariners. You have Mike Leake, Felix Hernandez. Leake's with the Diamondbacks. Felix is with the Braves, and then you have Wellington Castillo, who played a minute with the Mariners, who was on the Nationals. But you have David Price, Ryan Zimmerman, Ian Desmond. I mean, and Nick Markakis, a few big names. That are
especially
out.
David Price, and for the year that the Dodgers are hoping to have, and trying to redeem what was it, 2017 when they got bounced by the Astros.
Yeah, I think so. It's poor David Price because he's been very consistent throughout his career.
Yeah,
and it just never quite amounted. He had a couple.
Poor Dodgers too.
Yeah, I know. He got moved over there. So let's move into a little bit. One of the big things that just happened today is ESPN announced their new batch of radio hosts, and ESPN's gone through this stretch where they've let a lot of big names go.
Huge
obviously
names.
The biggest is Colin Cowherd. He goes on from being ESPN's top guy for a few years to essentially being chased out. Yeah. And that kind of started this. I mean, you got Dan Patrick, who was there for 20 years, both on TV and on the radio. But now they just released this new lineup, and it makes me laugh because
it's a doozy.
It's garbage. It's just not good. Like this is a conglomerate that is owned by they own Disney and ABC, and they have money to spend. I know they do from somewhere they can find it. And the best they can do for 4 hours is Keyshawn Johnson, Jay Williams, and Zubin Mehenti. What?
There's not a lot to say.
That's the first thing that their listeners, they're going to tune on, their iHeartRadio or their ESPN app, and here's Keyshawn Johnson for 4 hours. No, it just doesn't make any sense. And then 10 a.m. to noon, they have Dan Le Batard with Stu Gatz. And thank God they got moved down to 2 hours because they were 4, at least 3.
I was surprised that they weren't completely outed. I thought that they were going to be gone after these contracts expired and they did this new round of shows and everything. And ESPN was looking at it and they're like, you know what? In addition to those two, you know what America really wants? 2 hours of Max Kellerman by himself.
Yes.
America's favorite.
At the end of the workday, too. 2 to 4.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I just can't. What's going to energize me more than listening to Max Kellerman?
Nothing
at all. Max Kellerman's so awesome. To be fair, let's not hate on Kellerman too much. He's an awesome boxing guy.
True.
His commentary and play.
That's where his merit really lies. I mean,
sweet.
His first take.
His first take
personality is just the worst.
Well, he spouts these takes that I don't even think he actually believes in because he'll say something and everyone's just like, you sure?
Which I guess if he's playing the game, that's good TV, and I can understand it. However, it's just painful.
Very painful. And then the other one who thrown in here, and this will kind of also go along with something else that was kind of borderline, not disgusting because that is not quite fair, but Mike Greenberg has his own show from noon to 2.
Going back to radio.
While
still dabbling in TV as well, so
somehow
flex Greeny.
Yeah, I guess Greeny's just rolling in all that money right now. But
he really is.
His former host, who I know you liked him a lot.
Yeah.
And Mike Golic is out completely after 20-plus years at ESPN. They announced their new lineup, and they didn't even mention him in the press release. They didn't mention him in anything.
Broadcasting Hall of Fame.
He's a former I think he said he was a former wrestler or did like wrestling commentary.
He played in the NFL as well.
He played in the NFL. I mean, the Mike and Mike show was top of ESPN for a long time. That's a show that really kind of got that radio momentum moving when they were a little slow there in the middle of the 2000s. And they didn't even announce that he was leaving. And hopefully they'll do something for him later on. But ESPN isn't quite the company to go back and be like,
exactly.
We forgot to mention it, but here's Golic, have a nice life.
Well, and he also got the raw end of the deal when Mike and Mike split up and Greeny went to go do Get Up. And then he was relegated to a show with Wingo. Yeah. And I think you and I were just discussing last week. I was curious about the numbers and the ratings for that show because I never tuned in.
Never.
I mean, I like Golic. Wingo's never really my favorite. Yep. America's stepfather. Yeah. When Greeny's the real, actual blood father of America. Yep. So, yeah, poor Mike, man.
He definitely kind of got shafted there. That was really unfortunate.
Truly.
The whole thing. I mean, and even like you said, over the last couple of years, it's like he's been a nobody. And I really liked him. I think he gave good analysis. He had solid takes, and
he had a personality. He didn't shy away from having his opinions, even though they were not always the popular consensus opinions. But he was steadfast in them, and it was admirable, respectable, and he was and is one of the best in the business. Because of it.
It'll be interesting to see how he rebounds. Colin Cowherd is
you can't imagine he's going to completely go away. He's going to show up somewhere.
He has to be somewhere, and obviously he's not on Colin Cowherd's level, but he's a guy who deserves to be at least put into a position that he can be enjoyed, because I think he's not a guy who can carry his own show, but he's a guy who is the perfect sidekick to somebody who leads and he provides his analysis and is, like you said, his energy. So that was unfortunate.
Maybe he'll team up with Kellerman, give him that grounded, saltier, grittier
I thought that Kellerman could work with somebody, but then he ended up hosting or being on the show that Cowherd hosted, ESPN. I'm not even going to remember.
Oh, Sports Nation.
I love Sports Nation.
Sports Nation was good with Beetle and Cowherd at the beginning.
Was so good, and then Kellerman came in and it just all fell apart.
Krista Thompson at one point, I think.
Krista Thompson also dabbled in that a little bit.
Also, what happened to Michelle Beadle?
I have no idea, because she
was on NBA Tonight.
And then she was on another NBA show.
I think there was friction behind the scenes with her and some of the execs at ESPN. I'm not 100% certain about that, but because she was also on Get Up. It was the inception of it was Greeny, her, and Jalen Rose, and then you didn't see her much there, and it's like, oh, well, it's because she had these obligations doing NBA Tonight, and that was just too much to do, and being on the road for that show and everything. But she's just fallen off the face of the earth.
So she was there on Get Up, and then looks like she was negotiating a buyout at the end this last fall, and that's when they brought Rachel Nichols and Maria Taylor. Is also when they talked about where Beetle's going to go. So I don't even know if she's anywhere right now. Maybe she's just I don't know, because it just literally says that she's a sports reporter who most recently worked for ESPN, and if that's the case, that means she's probably not doing anything right now. So.
It's just so interesting for the first time in my life seeing like these massive staples all get turned over.
Chris
and
Berman a couple years ago was
Yeah.
gone, and now they brought him back with Tom Jackson.
Because everyone's like, hey, where the hell is Chris Berman
Yeah.
and Tom Jackson? I mean, that is the 2-minute drill. That's what
is
we want.
ESPN.
That is football.
That is just the perfect ESPN show. So let's move on to our segment that we're continuing this week, and that is called Closing Time. And we are going to have ours again. We'll start with you, and you were pretty excited a few minutes ago. You're like, I got it. I got mine. I think you changed it at the last second. So
I did.
What do you got for us?
Well, we decided, including our producer, shout out to Vinny, to just discuss all the ones that I had previously slated to talk about. So it ruined the surprise factor. So I really appreciate you guys factoring into that. So this one is pretty out there, but okay. Barstool Sports, pardon my take, number one podcast or sports podcast in the world. Pardon my take. Big Cat PFT. They had their annual Takey Awards.
Okay.
And so one of these awards, perhaps the most coveted award, is Blake of the Year. And there are only 3 men in America that were in the running for this award. Blake Griffin, who was the reigning Blake of the Year.
Right.
Blake Bortles.
Okay.
And Brooks Koepka.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't there I didn't listen to how it got started, but basically they see Brooks and his aesthetic and the optics of him, especially with the mustache, and it's like, you're a Blake. Come on. It's kind of like the whole George Kittle's name should actually be Greg Kittle. Kind of similar thing. But anyway, so how they decide who wins Blake of the Year is live on the show. They call each Blake, and whoever picks up the phone the fastest wins Blake of the Year.
Really?
So Blake Bortles went first.
Okay.
5.7 seconds.
Okay.
Pretty good. They were all impressed. They were like, wow, Blake Bortles, strong start. Next, Brooks Koepka.
Yep.
Comes in 5.5. Just barely in front. And then Blake Griffin, 3.1 or something. Just blew him out of the water.
See, hopefully they change their number, because I feel like Blake Griffin's going to know, like, oh, it's part of my tick. Like, I got to answer. So hopefully they change that number, because I feel like there could be some issues there. There may be a little bit of collusion going on.
There could be. I like to think that Blake Griffin, rather, is just more prepared, and he's been training. There is no off season.
There is no off season
for the competition of Blake of the Year. So Blake just knew, had his phone strapped at all times, eyes on the phone.
Back-to-back winner.
Elsewhere. Back-to-back winner. And they said that they are going to change the criteria for the winner next year. We'll see if that actually ends up being the case. But, yes, your 2-time back-to-back reigning Blake of the Year, Blake Griffin.
Not surprising. He is a great Blake.
He's a great Blake.
In multiple ways.
Really, really good Blake. So how about you? What do you have for closing time?
That's a great one. So this one is kind of unfair, because we definitely talked about it a little bit, but I feel like it has to be brought up because it's kind of funny. So the Washington Redskins are going through this battle of having to get their name changed. They're dropping sponsors. Sponsors are threatening to drop them.
FedEx is putting heat on them. Nike is taking down all the merchandise on the site.
Yep. I mean, they're losing. I mean, it's up to like hundreds of millions of dollars worth of sponsorships.
Dan Snyder has fled the country because he's under so much scrutiny, and he's with a small circle seeking advice for what he should do.
He is. His trusted confidants. He's definitely, I think, somewhere in Colombia, last time I heard.
That's where I would be.
Okay, that's what I heard. So, Bet Online, not a super popular betting site, but hey, we'll take it. We'll take what we can get on this show. They released odds for the new name of the Washington Redskins. The most obvious that has been also introduced in the past is the Washington Red Tails. Boo, that's boring. Let's skip that one. I'm going to start talking about all the interesting ones here. Not like there's one on here that's the Washington Capitals. That name already exists.
But I think it's with an O instead of an A.
Okay, maybe.
So,
maybe.
Just enough of a variance.
Still out of there. Don't look at my screen.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, come on.
Thought it was my computer.
Next one. The next one that I think is interesting is the Washington Presidents. And it just doesn't quite flow, so it's a little clunky. I think it's kind of interesting. The other one is, this one doesn't make any sense, the Washington Americans.
I just love the way that rolls off the tongue.
It's just so pure.
That would really reflect the ineptitude of the Washington franchise if really they rolled out the Washington Americans.
But there's no other team that's more patriotic than that one.
I'm actually kind of into it, the Washington Americans.
Washington Americans. Well, hey, that one is where is it? That is the 10-1 favorite. So
Feel good
By
about
the way,
those
Red
odds.
Tails was 3-1. Presidents was 5-1.
Okay.
So let's keep moving down the list here. The Washington Memorials. That's stupid because there's a Washington Memorial. There's also the Washington Monuments. Those are both 10-1 as well. Those don't have a shot against the Washington Americans. Not a chance. The next one is the Washington Roosevelts. That doesn't even make any sense.
No, not really.
Because you could just pick any president, and which is coming up. You can just pick any president and put him as, there's a possibility he could become the name of the franchise. Like Jefferson, the Washington Jeffersons, 20-1. The Washington Redhawks, which has also been floated around there in the past years. The best.
I don't want another Hawk team.
There's too many Hawks.
Yeah.
There are way too many birds, actually, in general, in teams. But the two best ones that I think should definitely be, they're 500-1 are the odds for these ones. The Washington Snowflakes, which that just means somebody's coming in and said, hey, we're gonna put Washington Snowflakes as one of the odds.
Real zinger.
500-1. If you want to make some money, that's the one I suggest you bet on. Or another 500-1 odd is the Washington Trumps. And unless Donald Trump purchases outright the Washington Redskins out from underneath Columbia hidden Dan Snyder, I don't think that'll happen.
Well, he might be able to, considering that the minority owners, all three of them, are opting out and looking to sell. So that's opening the door to the likes of PFT commentator. Commenter, rather.
Yeah. Or El Presidente could also try and sneak in on that. He did win.
That would be interesting.
How about the Washington El Presidentes?
Nice.
That'll work.
Washington Stoolies.
Yeah, there we go. They're not on the list, but I think you could put – I bet someone would take that.
You can put an inanimate object in there as a name, and I think there is as equal of a likelihood that becomes the name for the Washington football franchise than any of these, honestly.
That is true. I know Snyder talked about wanting to change the name only if they could continue to use the same logo and go skins, because it is tough to rebrand an NFL franchise that's been around for decades.
Yeah.
So I see the business side of it. We'll see what ends up happening. It's going to be a lot of fun to see how some of these go about. But as for now, I guess actually my other closing time real quick. Defending MLS champ Seattle Sounders will hit the pitch Friday at 6 p.m. on ESPN against the San Jose Earthquakes. That's my other one because that is also a Seattle team that is back in action starting this week. We are 2 days away from that, and I am pumped. And everyone else should be pumped for live sports. You have to absorb as much of it as you can, because if you don't, it could be gone.
I know.
The Ivy League just said no sports until January 1st. That's worrisome because they also were one of the first leagues to say no to college athletics in the spring, and that would be bad news bears if stuff doesn't start opening up. So get as much sports in as you can, as much live sports specifically. And we will see you next week with as much more content as we can kind of scrap together. We're piecing this show together. There's not enough much to talk about except COVID. We're trying, I promise.
We are.
But unfortunately, that's some of the biggest news right now. But until then, go enjoy your sports. And thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching The Locker Room on Spokane Talks. Check us out on Facebook as well as our other platforms. We want to hear from you. Join the conversation by emailing us at info@SpokaneTalksOnline.com. And for more sports news, opinions, and content, follow Justin and me on Twitter.